Government will reportedly extend the JobSeeker COVID supplement for a further 3 months to the end of March. But it will be likely paid at a reduced rate again, possibly at a level of $150 a fortnight. That's a cut of $100 from the current rate. Linda Burney is the Shadow Minister for Families and Social Services. Linda Burney, welcome back to breakfast.
Good day, Fran. How are you?
Good, thank you. We understand that the Expenditure Review Committee has now agreed to extend the JobSeeker supplement to March 28th. A final decision was due by Cabinet last night. Labor's been calling for the government to extend it. Are you happy now that it's extended in line with the end date of JobKeeper?
No. The Labor Party will be arguing in the Senate today that the supplement should be kept at the current rate of $250 until the end of March, in line with JobKeeper. We'll also be arguing in the Senate today that there should be a permanent increase to JobSeeker. That's really important. And for our listeners this morning, Fran, they'd probably remember the old New Start payment and the discussion that I know you've been part of in terms of a permanent increase. The government has not announced that, and we will be arguing for that. I think there's 2 points to this, Fran. There's the moral and the reality of people who are incredibly poor and for the first time in their lives, when they've been on JobSeeker, been able to put food on the table. But the second is an economic argument, and that is that people who are on small amounts of money, like JobSeeker, use that money in the economy, which is good for jobs and good for business.
Okay, so you're happy, presumably, the JobSeeker supplement's been extended to March, but you want a permanent increase there. We've got this increase now, apparently. The government's agreed, we think, to a supplement of $100 a week, a fortnight.
$150, I think.
150, is it?
I think.
Yes, I beg your pardon, 150. Is that adequate? Is that where Labor would set the rate?
No, it is probably, and I'll be looking to talk to people like ACOS and other stakeholders today to see what they're saying. And I'm not going to advance what Labor's position is, because we are still working through that on what a permanent increase is. Our position, as you know, is that we've been calling for a permanent increase, and this is not a permanent increase. And we also note, Fran, and these are the government's figures, not Labor's figures, that at the moment there's about 1.6 million people on JobSeeker, and by Christmas, because of the virus and the incredible increase in unemployment, there'll be about 1.8 million people on JobSeeker by Christmas, and that's a lot of Australians.
Does that explain, do you think, in any way the government's reticence to make this a permanent increase? It wants to see what the level of unemployment is by that time before it either works out an amount and the slug that will be on the budget bottom line?
I don't know what's behind the thinking of Josh Frydenberg and others on the Expenditure Review Committee, except that there are calls from the Business Council through to ACOS and everyone in between that there needs to be a permanent increase to JobSeeker, that the amount of $550 a fortnight, the old amount before the supplement, simply meant it kept people in poverty, and it was it actually stopped people from getting employment, which is why we've been arguing so vigorously that there needs to be a permanent increase. And today's announcement, by way of the Australian, does not give a permanent increase.
Well, this increase at $550 a fortnight, for the supplement plus $150 brings it to just over, I think it's going to be $357 a week. That's still, as I understand it, below the poverty line. I mean, I know you don't want to give this answer, but I'm sure you've looked closely at what is a livable amount of money and what others are saying. Is that close?
It is below the poverty line. And as I said at the top of our discussion, Fran, Labor will be arguing in the Senate today with amendments to some social security legislation, which the government rejected in the House of Representatives. They were modest, sensible requests and amendments, and that is that we believe that the supplement should stay in place at the current rate of $2.50 until at least the end of March. And as I said, Fran, there needs to be a decision by this government, and I'm just astounded that they have not announced a permanent increase.
Can I ask you about JobMaker? Because the hiring credit scheme that will pay employers up to $200 a week if they take on a worker aged under 35 was the centrepiece of the government's budget. It's before the Senate this week. I understand Labor will be pushing for amendments. What amendments is Labor putting forward to ensure older people don't fall through the cracks? That was the major concern, as I understand it.
Well, Tony Burke and Brendan O'Connor have been working on this. The real issue is that the JobMaker program, promising thousands and thousands and thousands of people being assisted by this, is going to be much less people assisted than the projections by the government. And I think that's really important for people to understand. The other thing, of course, is that it, as I understand it, it ignores people who are over the age of 55, and of course,
over the age of 35.
35, I beg your pardon. Yes, 35, and that's an awful lot of people that are currently on JobKeeper or JobSeeker. And who will be increasingly on JobSeeker.
Okay,
so it seems to me that it ignores an enormous amount of people that are going to be terribly affected and have been terribly affected by what's happening on the health front.
So just ask you again, what's Labor's strategy? Because it's an expensive program, $4 billion to create what we now know is likely more like 45,000 new jobs. If the amendments from Labor don't get up, will Labor wave through this legislation?
Look, I feel like it should be Tony Burke speaking about this, but obviously Labor.
What's your view? What do you think Labor should do?
I think you can see, Fran, from Labor's conduct throughout the pandemic, is that whilst we've pointed out to the government where the problems are and where the flaws are, and I think they've all been proven correct, and the government has resisted Labor's suggestions and then finally adopted them in many cases, particularly on the jobs front. I think that you will see Labor continue with that pragmatic approach and also a constructive approach to getting help out the door for people who find themselves in difficult circumstances.
Linda Burney, I guess she's the Shadow Minister for Families and Social Services. Can I ask you about last night's Four Corners report, allegations of inappropriate behaviour levelled at two ministers? The Attorney General, Christian Porter, was the focus of these claims. He has rejected them. He says they're not true. In fact, he says the nature of the claims are defamatory and he's considering his legal options. But are there questions now, does Labor believe there's questions now whether Christian Porter is a fit and proper person to be the Attorney General, the country's first law officer?
Well, a couple of things there, Fran. I watched the show and I watched part of Q&A after the show, not all of it, but part of it. I note that Alan Tudge, who was also mentioned last night in the show, issued a statement last night of regret, and Christian Porter this morning has come out swinging, saying that he's looking at his legal options. So I'm going to be very careful about what I say. Christian Porter is not only the first law officer in Australia, but he is also the leader of the government in the House of Representatives, a job that I think is questionable in terms of his skills. But at the end of the day, women in Parliament House and working in politics should be safe. And that's the most important thing, that they should feel confident that they can come to work without being pressured, without being harassed. And that's the paramount thing. And, you know, at the end of the day, people have to look into their own consciousnesses and also the voters of the seats where people like Christian Porter and
Okay.
others will make decisions about the future of those people.
Well,
I just basically say, Fran, that people should be able to be confident and safe in the workplace.
do you believe the women in Parliament House feel confident and safe? That it's a safe environment?
When you looked at that show last night, you would have to say, well, that's questionable. I have to say, from my own experience, Fran, that I have never experienced any sort of harassment or pressure, but perhaps people wouldn't dare. I'm not quite sure. And I'm a lot older and in a much more powerful position than young women who are going in as staffers.
This zeroed in on two senior ministers, and it's their positions in the ministry that were sort of brought into question here. But, you know, no party is chaste and pure. I'm sure there's bad personal behaviour on Labor benches as well. Is this a matter of conscience? And is it a matter of conscience, as you say, for Christian Porter or whoever to look into their own personal conscience, or is it a matter for the Prime Minister, given he's the Attorney General?
Well,
Malcolm Turnbull pointed out on Four Corners the risk of compromise. He believes this situation is very, very real.
I listened to Malcolm Turnbull last night, and of course Christian Porter is disputing Malcolm Turnbull's record of events, and that's between them. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important that those of us that hold representative and powerful positions within the government conduct ourselves with integrity. And it seems to me that issue of integrity is something that people need to think carefully about.
Linda Burney, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Fran.
Linda Burney is the Shadow Minister.